Today we're doing section 2.1, day 1, and we're going to be discussing complex numbers. So a quick little recall about material that we're going to be using today is that I squared is equal to -1. So whenever we have an I squared, it's actually equal to a real number. Complex numbers will always look like this. So standard form says a plus bi. A is the real part, and b is our imaginary part. So if you don't have one part, meaning the real part 0 or the imaginary part 0, you still put it in standard form. So for our first example, we're adding two complex numbers. So adding is probably the easiest of all four operations. So you just add the matching parts. So my real would be 12, and my imaginary would be -7i. And that's all we can do. For letter B, when we're subtracting, we would distribute this negative. So I can drop the first set of parentheses because nothing's going to change that complex number. So I'll have a positive 11 and I'll have a positive 6i. And now you simply combine like terms. So I have 6 for my real and 7i for my complex. And that's all you would do for subtracting. So the I squared equals -1 is going to come into play for the next example. So for example C, we are going to distribute. So now we're switching to multiplication. When I distribute this in, I get 12i minus 20i squared. Now remember that this means -1. And when I put it in there, it doesn't mean -20 minus 1. It means -20 times -1. So that's going to change it to be a positive 20 plus 12i. Notice because that 20 became a real number, I moved it in front, so I'm not violating standard form. For letter D, we're doing a binomial times a binomial. So you either FOIL or you do the box. So if you do the box, this goes on the outside. If you FOIL, go ahead and FOIL like so. So I'd have -14 for the first. Outer would be -35i, then I'll have plus 6i, and then I'll have plus 15i squared. So these two terms can combine, so I'll have -14. This will combine to be -29i, and because this is equal to -1, that's going to change to be a -15. So now I have two more like terms I can combine. And the final answer will be -29 minus 29i. There we go. So, relatively easy. This is something you learned in Algebra 2, so a quick little refresher on how to do these.